Well, everyone loves a good podcast. I think we do here. And our first story on the show today shows why. Fight to Win, How a Little Friction Sparks Innovation is the name of an article that we linked out to in Monday's issue of the Quality Digest newsletter. It originally appeared on the Excellent Knowledge at Wharton blog late last month. And as mentioned, this article is actually a summary taken from a Knowledge at Wharton podcast. The interview subject was Shane Snow, and Shane Snow is the co-founder of the marketing firm Contently. Snow is also the author of a new book entitled Dream Teams, Working Together Without Falling Apart. And makes sense, Contently is a content marketing company, and generally speaking, a company like that tends to have people working from home, working in remote locations, not working together quite as much. So this idea of how teams work together is one that Shane Snow would have at top of his mind. In the podcast, which you can access through the article, which is just down below this video player screen right down there, as all of our stories are. In the podcast, Snow talks about the nature of partnership and collaboration and what factors help teams be most effective. Ultimately, he believes it's the differences in teams rather than the similarities that help bring about the best results. And to explain what he means, Snow uses a couple of interesting analogies. The first is the baking of a cake. In other words, that very different ingredients, all hopefully in proper harmony, make for a delicious dessert. He also asks us to consider what makes, say, a great basketball team, or any sports team really, but basketball team is what he picks in this instance. I mean, sure, you have to have your scorers, people that do the glamorous work of scoring the points and putting the ball in the bucket, but you also need people to kind of do the dirty work, like playing tough defense or rebounding or making really accurate passes. When it comes to business, Snow says this, and I quote, I'm going to show this to you, not getting along well helps a team to turn ideas around and find solutions that no one could think of. It's actually that friction between, as I'm saying, it's actually that friction between different viewpoints and different ideas that brings out the potential to see further than anyone can see. And that's what he's saying, is it's really the teamwork that makes that work. I mean, generally speaking, most people like to get along with their coworkers, and for sure there are some great benefits to the social bonding that happens when people find themselves to be in agreement on things most of the time. But when it comes to achieving like stretch goals, let's say, and the big accomplishments that really move teams and organizations forward, tension is a really good thing as well. Now, I mean, let's be clear, tension doesn't mean those emotional, over the top, knock down, drag out, gutter fights that sometimes pass for meetings, but it does mean being willing to challenge each other, to respectfully debate viewpoints using facts and data, hopefully, and to make your case. I mean, there's always going to be compromise, but ultimately hard-won agreements that emerge from the process like this lead to better outcomes that are well thought out, and those are the ones that really help everybody win and help the organization move forward. I mean, it's really about, as I say, standing up for what you believe in respectfully. You always want to be respectful in those kind of a circumstance, but you also want to get your point across and you want to push back on one another. I mean, if you're all doing what you should be doing and you're all experts in your own field and you all have your perspectives and point of view, hopefully out of that will come some sort of synergy that will lead to better outcomes altogether. That's a really good thing to keep in mind there from Shane Snow. And again, check out the article from Knowledge of Wharton and the podcast as well, just below the player page right down there. Okay, well, before we move on to our features on today's show, I want to quickly tell you about an event that we at Quality Digest are helping to sponsor that we think is pretty cool. The Tech for Innovation Partnership and Scouting Conference is coming up October 24th and 25th in Boston. It's hosted by the Marcus Evans organization, which is a long-standing strategic partner of us here at Quality Digest. And they're also one of the world's leading providers of global summits. They do a lot of different summits on a lot of really interesting topics. Innovation is one that they tend to cover a lot. This event is going to bring together leaders in R&D, technological innovation, tech scouting and acquisition, external innovation, and partnerships. And they're going to address challenges to maximizing collaboration overall. Those in attendance are seeking to achieve growth, align innovation initiatives, and ultimately solidify competitive advantage. It's really a great opportunity for forward-thinking organizations and individuals to meet and exchange ideas. Again, that is the Tech for Innovation Partnership and Scouting Conference. It's from Marcus Evans, And again, it's coming up October 24th and 25th in Boston. If you want more information on that, you can check out the story link just below our player page right down there. And of course, as I always remind you, all the stories we're going to be covering on today's show, the two I've covered so far and the other two I'm going to be bringing to you here in a few moments, are all right down there. So check them out and comment on those stories if you like after the show's over, please. But definitely read them and comment. Okay, let's turn to our features. Now, our first feature today concerns a topic that's of everlasting import to everyone, really, and that's the graying of the workforce and the steps that business and academia are taking to deal with it. Finding, developing, and retaining great young talent to fill key positions that are open now or will be coming open due to, say, retirement is a challenge for businesses of all sizes in all industries. It's something that all of us, I think, are pretty well aware of. Are apprenticeships the new on-ramp to good jobs? And that's the name of an article, right there you can see it, which we republished in Tuesday's issue of the Quality Digest newsletter. The piece initially appeared in the Hechinger Report, which is a media company specializing in issues around education. This particular article was part of a series called Map to the Middle Class, which considers the good middle class jobs of the future and how schools are preparing young people to obtain them. The author is Hechinger Report senior editor Caroline Preston, and she interviewed several young people who are apprenticing at Zurich Insurance North America, which is based just outside of Chicago. I think they're in the town of Schaumburg. Many of them are also taking classes, many of these young people, at Harper College, which is just a few minutes away from the Zurich Insurance offices. Between their coursework at the school, their interactions with mentors, and assignments to various real-world projects at the company, these apprentices are getting exceptional training in areas such as business administration, claims adjustment, human resources, and a lot more. And that really is an interesting part of this equation I wanted to call out a little bit. The fact that this apprenticeship program at Zurich Insurance is based around a service or transactional business sector. Traditionally, we've all heard of apprenticeships in manufacturing, and those, let's not underplay them, those are proliferating really nicely as well. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that this model can work really well in a variety of organizations and work environments in sectors like insurance, for instance, a transactional sector like insurance or banking can really function really well. Service sectors like healthcare, these can function really well as well. There are a few different paths to success even within this single program at Zurich Insurance. Most people in the program came into it with only a high school diploma and a willingness to learn. That's of course always a key thing for an apprentice, is a willingness to learn. Some, however, had bachelor's degrees or even postgraduate degrees already, along with varying levels of professional experience. To them, the opportunity to apprentice at Zurich Insurance gave them a foot in the door at a great company within a solid business sector. Insurance is doing really well, and those are good jobs. Those are good, steady jobs. They pay a good salary, $60,000 and above in many cases, even for people in their 20s or 30s. Those are pretty darn good jobs, even in the suburbs of Chicago. Now, in addition, Harper College isn't only partnering with Zurich Insurance on programs like this. They work with other organizations with coursework focused on information technology, cybersecurity, and more. One important element that Preston points out in this article is that the so-called learn and earn model could really get a boost from the federal government should it choose to do so. Currently, employers such as Zurich Insurance generally foot the bill for programs of these types, both covering the costs of the apprentice tuition as well as paying them a modest salary while they're going through the two-year program. At one point, Congress had allocated $265 million to expand this program further, but those funds have apparently not been reallocated, according to Preston in this article. So bringing new companies on board is perhaps harder than it needs to be at this stage. And this is a good place for me to maybe riff on the old argument about whether this really is or isn't the role of government to support things like this. I mean, many people out there would feel that government should play more of a laissez-faire role. Let businesses get the workers they need and invest in it themselves because they're ultimately getting the benefits of that. The term corporate welfare is thrown around a lot for programs like this. So many people would say, well, it's not the role of the government to do that. Others would say, well, you think about it, yes, you're supporting companies who are getting the benefits of having these workers, but you're also supporting those workers. You're giving these workers a really good job. You're giving them a path to the middle class, which is part of the series that Hechinger is covering. And you're allowing them to have good jobs. You're allowing them to get educated in many cases, get a degree, get a certification in other cases, and really begin to have some mobility in their own careers. I can see both sides of this equation. I mean, it really is a fair argument to say, what is the proper role of government? And I don't know. I don't know really what I believe, but I think that certainly there's room for debate, and certainly you can see the benefits accruing for the organizations, sure, but also for the individuals that are going through this themselves. So be that as it may, this article demonstrates that an apprenticeship program such as this one can truly work if there's a commitment from companies that want workers and workers who want jobs. Looks like we have a question. Okay. Question from a viewer. I don't like my tax dollars being used for a program like this, but I see the benefits, maybe. Okay. How much money do you think would be necessary to support this? Oh boy. I don't know. While $265 million was appropriated, I believe, if I was reading Preston's article properly, in the Obama administration, I don't think that money's being reallocated. I mean, $265 million is kind of a drop in the bucket, really, if you think about it. I mean, that's kind of comparable to some of the money that, say, the Baldrige program would get or the MEP program would get. Also is kind of on the chopping block in the federal budget. I don't know, $500 million, $1 billion? I mean, I think that probably would be a fair amount of money. $265 million to me seems a little skimpy, given how many thousands of people, even with a low unemployment rate, want better jobs and want a path to the middle class. I think a $500 million investment would be a really good investment for America. Again, for American citizens, not just the companies, but it helps the companies too. So, yeah, I think something in that nature. Certainly three-figure, triple-figure millions. Somewhere in the $200, $300, $400, $500 million range, maybe up to $1 billion would probably be useful. So, academic institutions, getting back to the story, they make it their business to provide the coursework, and ultimately the certifications and degrees will do that if the funds are there. Again, addressing your question, the educational institutions will do it if the money is there, if it's provided by the companies getting the benefits of this, or the government itself. Talking about ROI, for instance, for companies, you, of course, would get workers that come in with skills that you need because you've helped them develop those very skills during the course of the program. Bringing in people with more general four-year degrees and kind of retrofitting them into the jobs that are available is kind of a less efficient way to do it. For the workers, they, of course, get the specific training that they want and that they know is going to have a value to the companies that are sponsoring them. So there's ROI definitely for them. A big question I'm sure that many of you have is, can workers leave shortly after graduation? Well, most of these programs, as I understand them, have some limitations on that. But sure, it's a concern. I mean, a company invests money in educating someone and bringing them in and giving them training, then that person leaves. Well, it's going to happen. The companies themselves, I think, have to be competitive in terms of keeping those workers happy, in terms of financial benefits and the general culture that the company offers, and that's not a bad thing. Hey, we know that happy workers make for happy customers. So I think investing in the workers that way, keeping them happy, making sure that those companies have to compete to keep their workers and keep them happy, I don't think that's such a bad thing either. So a good story there from Hechinger Report and from Preston, Miss Preston, who wrote that piece. Really good stuff there. All right. Well, for our final piece on the show today, we still have a little bit of time. I want to turn to an article that will, I think, very appropriately get you thinking. At least I hope it does. It certainly did for me. Thinking About Thinking. That's the name of a superb column from well-known author and consultant Kevin Meyer, who specializes in helping organizations achieve lasting lean transformation. We ran the piece in Wednesday's issue of the Quality Digest newsletter, but it first appeared on Meyer's website, his own website, late last month. Now, Meyer is a terrific writer. He's one of my favorite writers working in this space. But like most terrific writers, he's also a voracious reader, and he frames this article with 3 books he's recently read, all of which in some way, shape, or form touch on the nature of knowledge, especially experiential knowledge that one might obtain through direct observation and problem solving. And for what it's worth, I mean, that type of experiential knowledge is really valuable, especially in a manufacturing environment like many of you are in. Things like the Ono circle we've talked about, where you observe and see what you see and learn from that. Really, really valuable stuff. So this has a direct application, I think, to what many of you do for a living. The first of the three books that Meyer talks about is Factfulness, 10 Reasons We're Wrong About the World and Why Things Are Better Than You Think, by the late Hans Rosling, who was a Swedish doctor and statistician. This book points out that life across the planet is actually getting better in many statistically provable ways, yet many people feel a growing sense of gloom and doom, frustration, depression maybe, over the future of humanity. This disconnect has a lot to do with the evolution of human brains and our propensity to view drama and change with apprehension and fear. So keep that in mind. That's a really good frame, one good frame for what we're thinking about here with thinking. Next up is the book, What If We're Wrong, by pop culture essayist Chuck Klosterman. In that book, Klosterman wonders what future generations will think of our current belief systems within fields such as music or literature, science, and a lot more. One of the big set pieces in the middle of the book, I haven't read it, but as Meyer explains it, is a debate between physicists Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Greene about the evolving nature of reality. That's a particular highlight of the book. Klosterman's work here really forces us to step back and challenge everything that we think of as true. And again, I didn't read the book, but the Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Greene argument really is based on this idea of, well, has physics really come to its final truth? Is there more we're going to learn? Or, as deGrasse Tyson points out, it really has the rigor of 20th and 21st century mathematics gotten us to the point where we really understand the framework of everything. Greene argues not, Meyer thinks not. I kind of tend to think not, as much as we all love Neil deGrasse Tyson. And then there's Walter Isaacson's exceptional biography on Leonardo da Vinci. Isaacson is a well-known journalist whose sense of wonder and curiosity almost, but not quite, of course, matches that of his subject, Leonardo da Vinci. Having read this book myself, I've mentioned it on the show once or twice, I can attest and tell you that Leonardo had a mind unlike any other. His powers of observation were legendary and immense, really breathtaking. But he also had the ability to not see undertakings as failures, quote, or successes, quote, unquote. Everything was part of a process of learning purely for the sake of knowledge, with few, if any, preconceived notions. And that's something all of us really should work towards, is getting away from preconceived notions and not saying, well, something worked, it was great, something didn't work, it was horrible. There's always something to learn from a success or a failure. Taken together, these three books that Meyer mentions form a kind of a trilogy of knowledge, or if you prefer, a set of guidebooks about how to perceive our world and ourselves. From Rosling's statistical analyses showing that our emotional reality doesn't necessarily match the data, to Klosterman's wary looks at today's assumptions from the distance of some future state, to Isaacson's wonderment, again, about one of history's greatest polymaths, the common thread is that reality is often a lot more complex than we initially believe. And that is a hugely valuable asset for any human being walking the planet, especially for a person who wants to continuously improve things for a living. If you're a change agent, a quality professional, a continuous improvement professional, whatever you're doing, whatever your title is, if you're listening to this show, most likely that's a really good thing for you to keep firmly in mind. And a subtext here is the idea of bias, which is a term that's a lot in the news these days for reasons that really don't have a lot to do with disciplined thought. I mean, we all have bias. We all have frameworks that serve us less well than we're probably aware, and we all, well, most of us at least, I think, try to avoid failure. But when you're aware of those things, when you think about thinking, as Meyer recommends we do, you're able to better contextualize what you're doing and why you're doing it. And you can even maybe see failure not as failure, but as a process of successful experimentation. And that was Leonardo's great gift, his great insight. And it's one that we all would, I think, do really well to embrace ourselves. I mean, ultimately, when you think about thinking, when you take a step back and you look at who you are and why you do what you do, you're going to realize that if you want to improve things for a living, if you want to be a change agent, if you want to be a quality professional, you better get beyond what you think you know. You better maybe do what Klosterman says and look look back from a forward state and say, boy, what am I doing right now that is limited? What am I doing right now that has a certain framework that may be perfectly valid, may not be perfectly valid? And challenge yourself to do that, because if you don't do that, if you get stuck in your day-to-day that's just the same way you've always done it, you're really not going to learn very much, and you're going to really stay with what you have. So that piece by Kevin Meyer I think is a really good one. Thinking about thinking, it gives you a chance to really understand better who we are, again, and what we do. All right. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. If we do, pop one in there, Christopher. If not, I'm going to wrap it up here a little early. That is our show for today. I wanted to take a moment before I close to tease what is sure to be a fun show next week, because we're going to be, unlike this one where it's just me warbling on at you with that one question, we're going to be joined by a pair of really interesting guests. The first one is Dan Jacob of LNS Research. He's scheduled to join us. And he's going to be talking about some interesting findings from LNS Research's latest ebook about how to connect risk, quality, and safety for superior results. Those are all really important topics, and those things all come together and weave together really nicely when you look at organizational excellence. Also, we're going to be joined by and welcome Kelly Allen. And Kelly Allen is the chairman of the advisory council of the W. Edwards Deming Institute, and he's going to chat about why now is the perfect time to rediscover Deming, as if any of you could ever have forgotten about Deming. But we're going to be talking with Kelly about the Deming Institute's annual conference as well, coming up in October. That should be a really interesting event at the early part of October. So we're going to be talking to Kelly about Deming, about their event, and about a lot more too. So that is our show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to be back at you with another big week of Quality Digest newsletter, Quality Digest website with a lot of great content on Monday. And we'll be back at you here on Friday with another episode of Quality Digest Live. So we'll see you then. Have a great weekend.